Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live webinar. I hope you're all keeping safe and I hope you're all doing well, staying positive. I know that times are definitely not the best right now, but I'm sure that things are going to get better a lot soon as long as we all stay home and stop the spread of COVID-19. This is actually the very first episode of Tech Life Skills with Tanmay, a brand new webinar series that I'm launching. And the entire goal here is to take inspirational leaders from the world of technology. My very first, very special guest, his name is Dave Mukherjee. He is the CTO of Red Hat Synergy Asia Pacific. He's really passionate about what he does. He is an expert in all sorts of emerging technologies, from advanced analytics to artificial intelligence and cloud computing and open source and so much more. But then there's all this hype around technology. And a lot of the times, the hype is kind of out of phase, out of sync with the actual technology.
People just thought everybody will be having a 3D printer in the home, like a microwave replacement, and just didn't go there.
So is there any like sort of common pitfall with open source, or something that an issue that a lot of people experience with open source technology that you kind of want to touch upon and sort of warn people in advance so they can keep that in mind when they're planning out what they want to do with open source? As we know, is fundamental to everything that we do as humans, fundamental to the way that we live our lives. But the thing is, we have so much computing power today that sometimes we start to take for granted the talented people working behind the scenes to make sure we actually have the infrastructure to maintain that computing power and use it in the most efficient way possible in our lives. Now, today's special guest is a guru of deep learning and high performance computing, or HPC technology. His name is Sumit Gupta. He is the VP of products for AI, machine learning, analytics, and high performance computing at IBM. But specifically when it comes to high performance computing and HPC, how is that sort of next generation technology enabling a COVID response that couldn't have been a sort of level of efficiency that couldn't have been reached if it weren't for this next generation technology? But yeah, as I was saying, I would love to get your thoughts on folding at home and how that ties into the COVID response as well.
Yeah, so folding at home is another approach where they're trying to use personal computers like your laptop, my laptop, to run a small computer program on the laptop, which is part of this similar simulation for natural language processing. One of the most common use cases, and in fact, COVID has accelerated this, is the use of chat boxes, response systems, whether it's voice or text based.
Love AI, and one of the reasons I week. Now, she is a data and AI technology enthusiast, and her name is Ritika Gunnar. She is the Vice President of Data and AI Expert Labs and Learning at IBM, and without any further ado, let's welcome Ritika.
Is a set of initiatives that a consortium has come together to be able to provide the right solution.
How sophisticated is artificial intelligence in contextualizing or interpreting what it learns through natural language processing? A little bit of an analogy, saying that AI in a way is like a living, breathing system that continuously adapts to data. I do agree with that analogy, but I feel like we should be careful with wording, because when we say things like a living, breathing system, that kind of has like a double meaning to it, right? Because a lot of people could either take that as it's a system that adapts to the new data that's fed into it, or you could take it as it's in a way alive like a human, right? Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live webinar. I hope you're all keeping safe and I hope you're all doing well, staying positive. I know that times are definitely not the best right now, but I'm sure that things are going to get better a lot soon as long as we all stay home and stop the spread of COVID-19. This is actually the very first episode of Tech Life Skills with Tanmay, a brand new webinar series that I'm launching. And the entire goal here is to take inspirational leaders from the world of technology. My very first, very special guest, his name is Dave Mukherjee. He is the CTO of Red Hat Synergy Asia Pacific. He's really passionate about what he does. He is an expert in all sorts of emerging technologies, from advanced analytics to artificial intelligence and cloud computing and open source and so much more. But then there's all this hype around technology. And a lot of the times, the hype is kind of out of phase, out of sync with the actual technology.
People just thought everybody will be having a 3D printer in the home, like a microwave replacement, and just didn't go there.
So is there any like sort of common pitfall with open source, or something that an issue that a lot of people experience with open source technology that you kind of want to touch upon and sort of warn people in advance so they can keep that in mind when they're planning out what they want to do with open source? As we know, is fundamental to everything that we do as humans, fundamental to the way that we live our lives. But the thing is, we have so much computing power today that sometimes we start to take for granted the talented people working behind the scenes to make sure we actually have the infrastructure to maintain that computing power and use it in the most efficient way possible in our lives. Now, today's special guest is a guru of deep learning and high performance computing, or HPC technology. His name is Sumit Gupta. He is the VP of products for AI, machine learning, analytics, and high performance computing at IBM. But specifically when it comes to high performance computing and HPC, how is that sort of next generation technology enabling a COVID response that couldn't have been a sort of level of efficiency that couldn't have been reached if it weren't for this next generation technology? But yeah, as I was saying, I would love to get your thoughts on folding at home and how that ties into the COVID response as well.
Yeah, so folding at home is another approach where they're trying to use personal computers like your laptop, my laptop, to run a small computer program on the laptop, which is part of this similar simulation for natural language processing. One of the most common use cases, and in fact, COVID has accelerated this, is the use of chat boxes, response systems, whether it's voice or text based.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the 4th episode of Tech Life Skills with Tanmay. I hope you're all doing well, hope you're all keeping safe. Thank you very much for joining today's live stream. And before we even begin, I want to preface today's episode by saying that I'm personally very excited for today's discussion. And the reason for that is because we're talking about something that I'm really passionate about, and that is the field of education. Now, the thing is, not only are we going to be talking about this field of education, we're going to be getting opinions from thought leaders and industry leaders from this education platform, really from a global perspective. Now, in my opinion, the times of COVID-19 are really, I'd say, the first instance ever, at least in modern history, where we have had to completely re-architect the way that education has worked for decades, if not centuries. And the thing is, we didn't see this situation coming, and this crisis has sort of shown us the fundamental design oversights in the way that we educate today. It's really been an eye-opener for us, and I mean, think about it. Without the power of technology, schooling simply wouldn't continue in times like these. And so the reason that I'm so passionate about this field of education in specific is because it plays such a key role in modern human society. I mean, no longer can we make do with a society that doesn't have complex education. We can no longer make do with a population of humans working in fields exclusively like agriculture. We have to have people at that cutting edge of science. We have to have people innovating, and this is only possible when we're educating the next generation the right way. And so, once again, we have been able to solve problems, we have been able to advance humanity, and we will continue to advance humanity and solve problems if we educate the next generation in that right way. And that's precisely why we've come together today, to see how exactly technology and education are going to intertwine to enable that next generation of learning for the next generation of humans. And Without any further ado, I'm honored to introduce our three panelists for today. Let's welcome Satwant Palekar, Dino Miele, and Kathy Knight. And now I would love to start off with some introductions. So, Kathy, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure, somebody always has to go first, right? So I'm happy to do that. Well, good morning, everybody, and I'm thrilled to be here with Tanmay and our other esteemed guests. Tanmay's correct. I've spent many years working both in industry and in education, primarily linking industry with education to help influence and make sure that students are getting the essential skills that they need to build bridges to careers that they want to pursue. So my background is leading the Technology Industry Association here in Manitoba called Tech Manitoba. And I've worked with all the post-secondaries and most of the school divisions across the province. But just recently, I joined the Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology to lead their Cybersecurity Technology Center of Excellence. And I'm super excited about all of the opportunities around that. And I'm going to leave it there so that I can leave some airtime for everybody else.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Kathy, for that intro. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Now, just everybody, before we continue, I do want to say a quick fun fact about Kathy, and this is pretty interesting. She was one of the founding partners in Manitoba for building a network of P-Tech schools in collaboration with IBM, the government, and of course the education sector. So that's something that's really interesting and that might tie into our conversation a bit later. Also, before we continue, just a quick note, everybody. Again, this is going to be an interactive discussion, so if anybody has any questions or any comments or concerns, whatever, feel free to leave that in any of the live stream chats, and we'll get to that as soon as possible, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end as well. But continuing with the introductions, Dino, it's great to have you on the show. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tanmay, and my esteemed guests that are on the panel here today. I've been in the technology industry for over 45 years and started in industry, business, and went into education. I'm a retired CIO from the District School of Niagara and have pivoted to one of my passions, which is innovation and community development through Spark Niagara and Niagara Falls Ryerson Innovation Hub, continuing to be connected with learning for all, for youth, adults, and seniors, and connected to the education sector.
Exceptional. Thank you very much again. Cannot wait to hear your thoughts. As you mentioned, you've been in this sector for 45 years, and another quick fun fact that I do want to mention is that Dino has been working within this K-12 education sector for over 35 years. So there's a lot of experience. Yeah, there's a lot of experience. We're going to derive a lot of insight from that. Great to have you on the show. And of course, last but definitely not least, Satwant, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening from India. Satwant Palekar here. I have spent around 24 years in the field of education. To be precise, it's K-12 education. And I should say that I'm quite lucky enough to say that I was a one who started from the chalk and chalk methods into the classrooms. And then gradually I had metamorphized myself into the technology, into the classrooms as the technology seeped into India. And now I think I am quite glad enough to say that we have been taking and we have been considering technology as a prime importance into our tech-enabled classrooms, and we have been quite successful in that. So over to you, Tanmay.
That is amazing. Thank you very much. And a fun fact about Satwant. Now, this is something that I'm personally very excited by, and that is that Satwant is actually currently working on researching how neuroscience can be used to gauge the interest of students in the classroom. Now, we will be getting to that a bit later in the discussion, but I want to start off with a question about the times that we're in right now. Of course, COVID-19, this crisis, it's really opened our eyes to a lot of different things in society in general, and I feel like education has been one of the hardest hit fields. And so I want to begin by getting really all of your thoughts, but let's begin with Kathy, around how has COVID-19 impacted students, first of all, but then on top of that, what has been the reaction of all sorts of people, from teachers and educators to students to parents? What has that reaction been? What has the impact been like?
Well, I think as you noted in your introductory remarks, Tanmay, I don't think anybody was really expecting how how impactful COVID-19 was going to be on education. I think that really the biggest thing was that ability to pivot. When we went into self-isolation for this extended period of time, and governments were, the health priority was to send everybody home. It put everybody in a whole different situation, because you had parents who were expected to homeschool their kids. You could just imagine their eyes getting wide with fear. and also, parents had to balance not only, having to work from home, but also having to homeschool. And some of them also had kids that weren't in school, like preschoolers. And so that just creates a whole different area of potential havoc. And I want to say too that in particular, it would have had a much bigger impact on women, because women are still expected to carry most of the home responsibilities. So if a woman is working from home and doing the majority of schooling for the kids and so forth, that's another aspect to this that is also worth exploring. For students, I think that a few of the stories I heard, and in particular for high school students, those that were graduating this year, they were all working towards and looking forward to that big graduation ceremony and party, and many of them are not having that now. And that's basically, that's a huge milestone in most young people's lives, is that celebration. It's kind of that rite of passage from being a student to an adult, and going on to a post-secondary career. And then I think for educators in general, the big thing for them was having to pivot from being largely face-to-face classroom delivery to looking at this whole new world of online learning. And for some, it wasn't a new world. Some have been working in that way, especially at post-secondary. Many have done some delivery around online, and some haven't. And so I know for our organization, MITT, we're small. Manitoba Institute for Trade and Technology is a relatively smaller post-secondary, but no less mighty, right? And we were actually able to deliver our online courses within 3 days of announcing the school closures across the province. So, our motto is the right education for the right person at the right time. And we were able to provide a level of continuity that I personally think is quite impressive. So, but that doesn't mean that everyone was able to move that quickly. And I think also, for some teachers who are not tech savvy, this was particularly challenging. And I think that COVID-19 has really laid bare the cracks in the system, if you will, in terms of digital literacy for all. And teachers are included in that.
Fascinating. That's really interesting to hear. And in fact, I wanted to sort of pivot around that point that you mentioned around tech savviness, but I'll get back to that in just a moment. First, though, I wanted to see around those thoughts, like how COVID-19 has impacted students and teachers and parents. Satwant, have you noticed maybe anything different in a region like India? Is there something in specific that you think is different there, or something that, could help the broader community as a whole?
So my thoughts are actually akin with Kathy. In India also, we never expected that it is actually going to give us such a grave situation. We were not prepared for it. The students as well as the teachers were more aligned to face-to-face interactions, and more the schools were actually the happening places where a lot of learnings have happened. Obviously, there was a lot of technology into the classrooms, but we never thought that the entire face-to-face would be going into virtual. So, plus this was the examination time in India. So most of the students have gone into the state of shock, especially the board examinations as well as the higher education, because the entire examination has have come to a halt. And coming back to the same thing, there is a digital divide in India, obviously. So there are good schools wherein the teachers are highly technology enabled, wherein there are schools where just the teachers are just on a borderline with the technology. So, due to this digital divide, the teachers were actually struggling to bring the entire face to face onto a virtual learning platform. But somehow, due to the government systems and all that in India, we had actually managed to bring 100% of the face to face learning to an online system such as Diksha and Swayam, and the credit goes to the government of India. Followed by the things that what our students are facing right now is actually not understanding how to manage the timetable at home. The reason being they were never used to getting up so late and directly getting into the online classes, and then when to have their lunch break. How the teachers are actually grappling with the issues that if I've taught a particular topic in the classrooms, how am I going to assess my child? How am I going to assess the learning outcomes? How am I going to check the impact analysis or effectiveness of my classroom transaction? But there is a silver lining to it. Many of us have actually now realized that now the purpose of learning has changed. The purpose of learning is more skill based, that is creativity, adaptability, critical thinking or problem solving. So that is something, a good thing that has been evolving in India. And the most important is children are learning with experiential learning factors. Thank you.
Fascinating. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I mean, as you mentioned, in terms of that skill-based learning, that in itself, I guess you could say that COVID-19 has kind of been like a catalyst for change in that way. It sort of forced us to move quicker at a larger scale than we were before, at least. And I wanted to get back to the point that you were mentioning, Kathy, and that you sort of elaborated upon a little bit, Satwant, and that is two things. First of all, technology is necessary for learning now, right? We need the power of technology to learn. You know, technology, essentially all schooling is becoming entirely virtual, at least for the time being, right? There's always going to be some factor of in-person learning, but for the time being, the mainstream sort of schooling needs to be virtual because of this crisis, and there's like this there's I mean, as you mentioned, there's this gap between the people who do and don't have access to technology, and it can be for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, even here in Canada or the U.S. or India, wherever it is, there are parts of the country that simply don't have access to good internet, right? There's parts of the country where the people can't afford to have the kind of technology you would need for this schooling, and then on top of that, there's also the issue of them not being tech savvy enough to use that technology, even if they have access to it. So, what do you think? How can we solve those problems? First of all, how can we make it so that people actually have access to the resources that they need in terms of technology in order to learn, in order to be schooled? But then on top of that, also, how can we make it so that people who aren't necessarily tech savvy also have the resources with which they can learn. So I guess we'll start off with Kathy, and then we'll really get opinions from all around the panel.
Yeah. Well, I got to have a firsthand look at that when I was with Tech Manitoba, because we had a digital literacy project that we were delivering across the province, and it had two streams to it. One was around delivering, technology education, like really basic stuff, like just how to turn on a computer, right from, how to use email, that kind of, how to, how to use search engines, like things that a lot of us would just take for granted. And, but, as you mentioned, there are communities, not just in Manitoba, but around the world that don't have internet access. And so, so on that side, it made it challenging in some ways to promote. We actually had to go right into communities and put up posters and put out flyers and like go sort of old school on marketing to let people know that they could go to a community center in their area or to the local post-secondary to get this free training. But then the other thing was we were also aware through consultations that there were a lot of teachers that wanted to be able to improve their teaching practice by learning how to use more technology tools. And the subscription to those programs were just off the charts. I mean, I'm getting some help here. Okay, you get off there. The things about working from home, right? So, you know, what we had projected as targets for participation more tripled within the first year.
Wow.
And when COVID hit, what the organization had to do was partner up with another organization called Computers for Schools, and Tech Manitoba, Computers for Schools, and the University College of the North, and others, MITT included, partnered to help get these refurbished computers out to families that did not have access to a computer.
Wow.
Now that only solves part of the problem, but what was interesting to me was they used a nomination process. So if you knew someone who needed a computer, you could nominate them, and then the organization had a draw to see who would get them. And they had over 700 nominations, and they only had 240 computers. So that really tells you something in terms of the need. And what we were hearing and what I've heard are stories where, you know, the family would either have no computers, or they would have no computer, or they'd only have one, but that would have to be used for all the kids in the family to get their learning. Plus, if there was a parent that had to work remotely, they would have to have access to it as well. So, you know, it just shows you how much pressure COVID-19 put on families, and especially those that are impacted by the digital divide. And then the other point that you were making is just the fact that there are a lot of families that don't even have access to the internet. And that, I think, is something that has to be resolved by governments, provincial and federal, working together. I think there's a huge role for the telecoms to play in that, in terms of infrastructure, and I think in terms of making access to, the internet affordable for all Canadians. So those would be sort of the high points that I would make about that. And, you know, just the fact that I think that this shows too, that there's an appetite out there by educators to learn more, and really from the perspective of how they personally see the use of technology tools in terms of how it can improve their teaching practice. And I want to say too that I think that teachers do an amazing job, and I think that there has been exponentially higher appreciation and respect for the work that they do as a result of COVID-19. There are a lot of parents out there that are going, wow, I mean, I always appreciated teachers, but not as much as I do now. I mean, so I just wanted to put that out there for all the educators that might be listening today, that we appreciate you. You're among those frontline workers that are helping to get us through this.
Absolutely. I mean, really, education is fundamental, and the work that teachers and educators are doing right now is absolutely critical. So we definitely appreciate that. And now I want to get your thoughts, Dino. So how do you think we can bridge that digital divide, and how do you think we can make it so people have access to the resources they need for this virtual learning, but at the same time, they have the skills required to be able to use those resources in the first place?
Thank you, Tammy. That's for sure what's something that has to be looked at, those three areas. You have to look at it that when it looks like at the leadership of the school boards, in my opinion, they had to go from a normalcy mode to emergency management and crisis management. At the educator level, we took them away from a social environment of teaching with students in a room. And with the students, what happened is now we've isolated them at home with or without technology, And the parent, depending on whether they're a middle class family or a frontline worker or a low socioeconomic area, it's difficult because they have to now adapt to connecting without a social interaction with technology. So how do we bridge that gap? I know that in my opinion, what I've seen is I know that the in Ontario, the ministry is working very hard at figuring out how many students have internet and how many don't. I know that school boards are working hard at trying to figure out how can we bridge that gap or fill the gap of students who do not have technology, because there could be one computer, two computers in the home, but there might be three or four children. And how do we make sure that there's equitable access to internet? And so I know what they've done in Ontario is that did an emergency infusion into the homes that did not have computers that they knew of. And they had what's called connected devices. They looked at the telco companies and whether it was Rogers, TELUS, or Bell, and they made sure that if it's an iPad, it had an LTE SIM card built into it, so there's
Nice.
connectivity for the students. Looking at how the parent could help is that if they had an iPhone or whatever, we could turn that into some sort of internet device that allows the student to connect for that 1 or 2 hours of learning. So how can we bridge that gap? I think it's more of it has to be a holistic approach from the ministry itself of education across Canada, the different ministries, the school board leadership, and also some of the companies that deal with technology and the telecom companies that help with internet. And again, it has to be connected devices. But on top of that, you could have all the connectivity, you could have all the speeds and feeds that you want, but teachers need training, parents need training, students need to learn. In the younger grades, they need to learn how are they going to be using that device. What's digital citizenship? How do I react on a computer compared to face with my teacher or my fellow student or friend in the classroom? So there's a lot of variables. It's something that you can't plan. What's happened is really beyond business continuity planning, beyond emergency preparedness, and beyond pandemic planning. No one ever foresaw this happening. And so we have to look at the various opportunities that are out there, but it has to be a community-based collaborative effort. As you said, training, opportunities to find technology, help the parents in this struggle too, because an example is I know I have two neighbors that are frontline workers. They're not home most of the time when the students are online with the teacher, and they have technology. What about the ones that don't? Those are the challenges that we have to start looking at. And again, it comes down to everyone working together, making sure that we have the three areas covered. Training for teachers, parents, and students, internet connectivity in some way or somehow with the device as it's given to the home where the students are. And the third one is making sure we teach good digital citizenship, cybersecurity areas, and safety.
Fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I will definitely come back to our points on, the digital citizenship and those skills that are required, those fundamental skills really of using that technology. But first of all, Satwant, would you like to add anything to that?
So that's what my thoughts are reverberating with Kathy and Dino. The thing is that in India, the same we are grappling or rather struggling with the same problem, the internet issues, as well as the number of devices or per home. So we have, as per our analysis, we found that there were not even a single computer at people. They were not having a single device at home. But yes, then what we thought was we tried to have some parent friendly apps, and then we asked and we had introduced certain parent friendly activities, quite simple easy activities for the parents, so that if they download those activities from the Play Store, they would be able to understand how I need to actually teach my child, or how can I actually assist what has been taught into their classrooms. So this is something good that has happened here in India, is that they have started developing parent friendly apps and they've started putting it on the Play Store, so that instead of putting it just using into the computer devices, people have started now downloading it on their mobile phones, and they started using that. So that is something quite a good seamless effort, or I should say a seamless transition that has happened directly from face to face to a technology enabled classrooms, or I should say a virtual learning platforms at home. And since I'm also associated with the municipal schools here in India, so there was a seamless transition from face-to-face teaching directly to online platform due to the reason being there were a lot many parent-friendly apps developed so that parents and students could actually learn with certain simple techniques what exactly has to be done into the classrooms.
Interesting. So, I mean, you talked about the parents, you talked about the students, but I also want to get your opinion on teachers. So, how is technology helping the actual well being of the teachers themselves as well?
Oh, so this is a favorite topic of mine. I always was actually, when I was doing this thing with my teachers, one of the need-based analysis, what I found was my teachers need to be trained or professionally trained on technology. And this actually was uh, like a lucky thing for me that happened because while I was training my teachers on technology and pandemic thing happened, so my teachers never felt that kind of a pain of having a seamless transition to a technology enabled classrooms. But yes, the percentage of usage of technology was obviously less because it was a lot of face to face interaction, it was collaboration, communication into the classrooms, and the technology was integrated while teaching. But now it's actually 100% technology. So obviously, somewhere the well-being of the teacher is being affected. The reason being her attention is divided on the household chores. Her attention is divided on ensuring that the 100% children are learning into the classrooms. Her attention is also divided on the online assessments that he or she has to do it over the technology. So, somewhere I believe a digital fatigue is happening. More of a screen time is actually happening with the teachers. Yes, COVID pandemic has done two things. It has got two aspects. One is that there was a continuity in the education. Education did not have a pause or a halt. But the other part is that the screen time, both of the students as well as of the teachers, are increasing, and it is leading to digital fatigue gradually. And that is a cause of concern.
Interesting. I mean, you were mentioning screen time, and something pretty interesting about this entire sort of pandemic crisis is that the screen time on my phone has only gone down, but that's only because my screen time on my computer's going up. So, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, so screen time is definitely a thing, and digital fatigue is definitely an issue. You're right. And I'm gonna come back to you, Dino, actually, because you mentioned that we've gone from this sense of normalcy to emergency, right? Something that we never could have seen coming just a couple of weeks ago, and it all just happened so instantly. So, do you think that eventually we will return to some sort of sense of normalcy? And what I mean by that is, what will the long term or long lasting effects on this industry as a whole be because of this one crisis?
That's a great question. Normalcy, I don't know. There'll be a new normal perhaps, but what's happening right now is everyone is calmed down from the emergency part because we're following what the public health is telling us to do. We're looking at evidence-based data, the modeling that's happening on a regular basis, and that at least gives us an idea, a screenshot of what we can see is ahead of us. But what you'll see is exactly what we're already hearing about businesses reopening. And there's that physical distancing and social distancing, right? They're two different things if you want to really get down to the nitty gritty between the social interaction and the physical, connection with the students and the teacher in the classroom. Already, if we want to look at some examples, Denmark, Japan, China, Taiwan, they have had about a month ahead of us in returning to school. They've set up desks that are, approximately 2 meters apart. They've looked at different ways of busing students to the school because that's important. How do we get the ones to the school? How do we enter the school? What's happening? Is there a pre-screening at the school? Is there multiple entrances? Those are the things that we have to start looking at from the panic mode, emergency mode to, hey, we know what we've got to deal with. We know where we're going. The important part is that the school boards are working on this, and they're working very diligently and making sure that they follow everything that they can to because the important thing is the safety and the opportunity for students to continue learning. Parents will not be able to go into the school as they used to. So those are things that are going to be, if you want to call it the new normal, is a perfect example. In Denmark, for instance, they know that the younger grades, and we know it here, how do you stop them from being social connections? How do you stop a grade 1 or a kindergarten or grade 3 student not wanting to run over to their friend and say hi to them and be close? So in Denmark, what they did is they actually bring them into quads of groups of 4 in the younger grades, and those 4 stay together for the whole day, and they're distanced from another group. And that's one example of what the new normalcy might look like. Again, I'm not in a position to say what they're doing, because I know there's a lot of directors working in the province on committees to look at this and how they're going to move it forward. But my opinion is we'll see all of the rules that we're asking business to do will probably fit into the school as much. They'll also look at reutilizing underused space, gymnasiums, libraries, to spread the classrooms out. It could be a phased-in approach. It could be a morning school and then an afternoon school, which goes later into the day. So there's a lot of things that are at play here for the new normalcy. But I can tell you, sorry, just one thing is that technology is going to play a key role, whether it's blended learning with applied learning included in it. That is going to be a key player.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what you mentioned around technology sort of blending in here, that I believe is is sort of like a key sort of factor in this change, in this transition. And whether it be K-12 or universities and colleges, I feel like we're going to see more of the tech industry sort of collaborating with the education industry on doing a lot more things from here on out. So do you want to maybe talk a little bit more, Dino, and we'll get to Kathy, because I think you might also have some really interesting opinions on this, around how that sort of collaboration between the education sector and the technology sector would look like? Do you think things will move faster in the future because of this crisis? Do you think we're going to see a shift in the way, people think about education, the way these things are structured?
Yes, absolutely, Tammy. That makes sense. We are going to look at a stronger shift to online learning. We're going to look at, remote or learn at home, whatever you want to call it. There'll be the opportunity of a hybrid environment. There'll be some school time and some screen time, if you want to call it that. Definitely. What's going to happen is you're going to see the major corporations in technology start to see how can we create or help solutions that help education. So there could be devices, as I said, that will be ready for connection. The Ministry of Education in Ontario is improving and moving forward, if I recall, on the broadband modernization program, which means bringing internet to all the homes if they can, and the best way they can, along with the telecom companies and the school board, for the students to have access to the online learning opportunities that they have. We're also going to be seeing more of the connectivity piece being remote, in a sense that you can use any device to learn from, where right now it's only one platform or two. We're going to have some sort of standardization where we can get into whether it's a Desire to Learn, a Google Learn at Home, all the different devices that are out there and all the different platforms.
Interesting. And now, Kathy, I would love to get your opinion on that as well. Oh, I think you're muted.
That's the classic Zoom thing that somebody had to do it in this panel, and it was me. I actually I concur with pretty much everything. I concur with everything that Dino said. Couple of things. I think the fact is that we are not going back to the way things were, for sure. And I think that this has actually been a catalyst for both secondary and post-secondary organizations in education that had maybe long been looking at, but like everything, there always has to be some kind of push. And this COVID pandemic has been that push to really force us to look at how we deliver education and how we can improve or really adapt to what this situation has presented to us. So I think I always think necessity is not just the mother of invention, it's the mother of innovation. And this is what COVID-19 is how it's impacting both industry and education. But I think some of the areas that we're going to have to put more emphasis on, absolutely cybersecurity. As more people are going online, more of our citizens need to understand that that they have to that it's important for them for their own safety and privacy to know more about how to protect themselves. And so, you know, and you can have all the best security measures in place, whether you're a school division or a company, but you know, the weakest link in that are your people. So if your people aren't well trained and well educated in security measures, then that's where you're going to find gaps in your systems. So and especially when we're dealing with children. So I think that this is going to become an imperative across the country and across the world. So the other thing too is that I think that there's going to be more opportunities in applied learning for technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality. And so I think we'll probably see a growth in that area of the industry. And then the other thing, and we've seen this in Manitoba, and this is something that my organization, MITT, has been very good at, and that's how we integrate learning from industry experts into the classroom. And whether that's face-to-face or whether it's in person, but even things like experimenting with virtual work experiences. That I think those are the things that I think are going to become more common as we move forward. So, you know, it's really about, and I think the other thing too is it's about online learning isn't just about having a teacher stand in front of a camera and deliver a lesson the way they used to be. It has to be interactive. It has to be a different kind of experience. And so I think there's a lot of learning and innovation to happen in that space. And one of the things that I'm curious about, and I really appreciated, Dino, what you were saying about the role that the telecoms play. I know that in Manitoba, many of our school divisions have partnered up with Bell MTS to ensure that students have devices and that they are connected. But one of the things that I'm thinking about, which I've often thought was missing, was this whole coordination between what the federal government can do to support education and the provinces, recognizing that education in Canada is the jurisdiction of the provinces. But there has never been a lot of collaboration and continuity on that. And I think that COVID-19 presents an opening and an opportunity for that to happen. And I think if we all work together, we could get there faster and we could get there better.
Interesting. I totally agree. I mean, collaboration is always the best way to get things done, right? Instead of reinventing the wheel, instead of starting from scratch, when we work together, especially in a crisis like this one, we always come up with better solutions faster. And so, by the way, just so you know, quick pause. We are getting lots of really interesting questions from the live stream. That is amazing. Keep sending them in. We will be getting to them in just a moment. I see quite a few. We've got some from Tim, from Akash, from Gokul, and we'll get to them in just a moment. But first of all, I want to expand upon the point that you just mentioned, and we're gonna start with you, Kathy, and then I'm gonna get Satwant's thoughts on this, and that is that, I mean, and let me actually give you an example. So I was in Winnipeg actually a little while ago for the Creative Foundation, and I had one of the things that I was doing there was a series of quite a few workshops for high school students at one of the high schools. And when I was there, of course, I was doing these workshops on coding and teaching them like these fundamental computational thinking skills in coding, and actually showing them like machine learning code and stuff like this. But as I was doing that, I realized that while it is possible for these kids to get, or for these students to get these coding concepts, one thing that they might have difficulty with even before that is understanding the interaction with the computer in the first place, right? Even those fundamental skills like, I can tell them, go to this link in your web browser. Well, what exactly does that mean? Or when you download this file, I want you to put it in a folder on your desktop. How do you do that? Like these little things. And I noticed that while I have always been an advocate for teaching coding in the classroom and getting them to learn how to code, you really just generally need to know how to interact with technology in the future as a key skill, not necessarily just how to code. Obviously, coding is one part of that because then you can interact with the computer at a lower level. But just that technological interaction. And that extends all the way from how do you use a computer to how do you code a computer to how do you make sure you're secure on the internet, because the internet is sort of interwoven with all of our technology now. From fridges to televisions, right? It's all using the internet. So, Kathy, I sort of wanted to get your thoughts on how those fundamental technological skills can really be given to these to students. What are some initiatives to sort of help make that happen? And at the same time, I want to have a special focus on cybersecurity, and I want to see, what sort of initiatives do you see to really getting kids to understand how to be secure on the internet and with their technology?
Well, I think one of the examples, and I think this also blends in that whole idea of how provinces through education and the federal government can collaborate to explore new models for delivering education. So the initiative that I helped start with MITT, Tech Manitoba, and the Pembina Trail School Division in collaboration with IBM was based on this pathways to technology through early college and high school. And often known as PTech, and in Manitoba we call it Pivot. So we've been demonstrating that model over the last 2 years. And what I would say is it actually allows students that are underrepresented or maybe really not engaged with school to choose a pathway through to technology through cybersecurity or software developer. So what that does is it gives students the opportunity to earn up to a full year towards a post-secondary degree by the time they're in grade 12. So when they graduate, they can actually come to MITT to either finish their diploma in cybersecurity, which right now I believe we're working on a articulation agreement with the University of Manitoba, which would also then allow them to accelerate their university career by starting in year 2 of computer science instead of year 1. But I think that's one measure, and I think it's highly effective. And it's definitely for students who have a big interest in tech. But to your point, Tanmay, I think we need to go further, and I think we need to, and I think that, Dino, I'd be really interested in your thoughts on this, but I would really love to see more collaboration between industry and education in terms of developing those skills for teachers and to bring more experts into the classroom, and even at a very young age. I mean, I know of schools in the States and I'm sure even in Canada where they're doing, they're doing coding and they're doing technology exercises with kids as young as kindergarten and grade 1. And let's think about tech not so much as this, side project that we work on, but let's think about it as one of those core skills that everyone is going to need going forward. And like you, Tanmay, I'm not just talking about coding, thinking of coding as part of the language of technology in the same way we think about English or math. But let's also think about those other critical skills like problem solving, decision making, yes, computational thinking. And I think those all have to be age appropriate, woven into curriculum right from the time that your kids start going to school.
Totally. And in fact, I mean, you mentioned you'd be interested in getting Dino's thoughts. Absolutely. It was actually just about to get to Dino because I feel like he has a really interesting sort of link to this area. But just before I get to you, Dino, one thing that I do want to mention, what you said about sort of the role of technology in education and how we don't just want to focus on coding, but rather these problem solving and decision making and computational thinking skills, I couldn't agree more. And really, one thing, and the way that I sort of like to think of it, and this is why I'm such, this is why I'm so passionate about teaching kids to code, is because in my opinion, coding can be kind of like a really good proxy for learning a lot of these fundamental skills, right? When you learn to code, in my opinion, if it's taught the right way, you're not just learning the syntax of a programming language, right? Because that's easy. Anybody can do that in a week. But what's difficult is saying, I've got this problem. How do I break it up into individual components and use the tools that I have access to with the power of technology to solve that problem? Right? That's what's really interesting. You don't think from the technology backwards, you think from the problem forward. And so that's really interesting, and I couldn't agree more. Yes.
Well, I wanted to build on that just with a story. So I have somebody that I've got a great relationship with. He's an entrepreneur, very successful. And he was telling me about how when he had to learn calculus, and he was like, why do I need to learn calculus? And he said, then when he actually was working in cybersecurity for the military in his early days of his career, and he realized that calculus was what actually taught him how to think about certain problems. So your point, Tanmay, about how it helps you break it down into those kind of components that will get you to a solution, I think that that's very important. So that kind of goes to that computational thinking and the importance of that, and the why, because I think everybody, regardless of whether you're a child in kindergarten, or you're middle school or high school, or adult learner, whatever, running the gamut of the types of learners that are out there. Everybody wants to know why. Everyone wants to know why they have to learn something. And I think that that's where we haven't made as much a strong case in terms of technology as being part of core curriculum, not just as a supporter and enabler, but also as far as a critical skill that everyone's going to need to be able to successfully participate in what is becoming a global digital economy.
Really interesting, and I mean, to sort of add to that, what you mentioned there around students wanting to know why, reminds me of like these series of videos where students will go up to their teacher and be like, what are 3 things that you use every day, and they'll say something like, I use my toothbrush or my watch or my glasses or whatever, and then the students will be like, notice how you didn't say calculus or math or something of that sort. But what they don't realize is that the problem solving skills that you learn as you learn those concepts, that's what you really want to learn about. So I completely agree with what you just said. And now, of course, one thing that I would want to add really quickly is that on this sort of topic of introducing, kids to the world of code and computational thinking and these fundamental skills, I actually have a keynote on May 28th at 11:30 a.m. EST for the Cyber Exchange Summit. So it'd be great to see you there.
Yeah. I will tune in. One of the things that you were also raised there is the thing that technology is, that's unique about technology, I think, is the speed at which it changes. And especially in cyber, because the technology in cybersecurity now is evolving every 35 to 45 days. So, we have to be able to recognize that what technology does is it embeds in us the mindset for continuous learning, and that we have to be nimble, we have to stay ahead. And it's also this great leveler. So even if you're intimidated by it, you can always look at it from the perspective that there's always somebody who will know more than you, and there'll always be somebody who knows less than you. But that engagement with learning is really, really essential. And the idea that you, just because you earn a certificate or you graduate from college or university, or you graduate from high school, that's not the end of learning.
Interesting. I totally agree. And I do have a really interesting question for you, Satwant. But just before we get to that, I do want to quickly get Dino's thoughts on this as well, around this sort of technology in education, not even just technologies generally. How do we make it so that kids get these fundamental sort of technology literacy skills and of course, the field of cybersecurity as well? As Kathy mentioned, I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. So it's interesting. I really like what everyone's been talking about here. And the interesting part is that in my career, a lot of the CIOs and the school boards, many, not a lot, all of them, they make sure that the infrastructure for security is built for the schools and for the education center, so that no one can come through the firewall, no one can do things unless it's caused by the end user themselves. Now we've added a more complex environment where we have different type of devices going to the homes with different type of security awareness or understanding. And that adds a lot more complexity on how can we make sure that we start to do something like let's call it a cybersecurity framework that's tucked into lessons transparently in the schools for teachers, for parents, and for students. And then there could be cyber citizenship. It could also be how to know what a phishing attack looks like, what malware is, giving them an awareness and understanding of the different things that could happen to your device that gives away your privacy, or it gets taken over by ransomware by someone else, which is, all of a sudden now you're caught trying to pay to get your device back or the data that you have. So my thoughts are, STEM learning is something that everyone has caught on to, whether it's STEM or STEAM, adding arts to it. We add cybersecurity built into it. So an example is in the States, they have a program for grades 6 to 12 called Garfield Cyber Safety. And it's engaging. It's adventures with Garfield, but in there are good lessons for 6-year-old to 12-year-olds about, how to use your password correctly. How do you set up an authentication in a balanced and easy way for a student to learn? And then we have things that we should be doing for professional development for teachers. All of this has to be put into this, what I call the cybersecurity framework.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And now I want to get to something really interesting, Satwant, your research in the field of neuroscience. This is something that I'm really interested in. I want to hear more about what you've been doing. How does neuroscience relate to the field of education? What sorts of insights can you derive from it? And what can you do with those insights?
Okay, so before I actually talk about neuroscience, I would like to build up what Kathy and Dino has spoken about the cybersecurity and the digital skills that we need to imbibe into our children. Now, I'm quite proud to say that in India, our students, right from year 6 onwards, or I believe year 4 onwards, they have been actually tuned in, or rather, they have been given some kind of conditioning to digital skills, like understanding of passwords, like how I need to behave when I'm there on the social media, what kind of digital footprints could be actually recorded, and so on. So, but it was actually at a very primitive stages. We had not thought of this thing coming up so that actually we could educate them more. But some type of conditioning has been done. But yes, coming to the cybersecurity, or rather, I could call it as a digital footprints, that we need to work in collaboratively with the governments as well as with the industries to understand how well actually we could give some kind of a circumference to it, where we could understand how actually our students would be aware of cybersecurity and what kind of digital manners now they have to actually acquire in to understand this technology enabled classrooms. Coming back to neuroscience, Tanmay, it's actually at nascent stages. Again, the credit goes to my the pandemic, wherein once when my teachers were actually giving those online lessons, and it actually clicked into me that it's just a one way thing happening. I'm not able to understand. Obviously, the physically the child might be present over there, but the child is not actually understanding what exactly he is getting into it. So through my research, I have just got into the thing of artificial intelligence and the neuroscience thing, wherein I found out that we could actually gauge or measure the interest level of a child into the classrooms, which could actually help me to go to the other side of the fence and understand what is the effectiveness of my classroom teaching? How exactly am I teaching? And it would also give teachers and the leader educators an insight. How could she or he could change the teaching strategies, certain online teaching strategies, so that it could help raise the interest level of the child, or rather, I should say, it would increase the skills of adaptability, creativity, problem solving, critical thinking into the children. So the crux is I'm quite at a nascent stage of neuroscience. I'm actually doing a lot of research into it. I've just got a little bit of an insight that it is much related, as you said, into to coding as well as the artificial intelligence.
Interesting to hear. Yeah, I mean, the reason, and really the reason that I'm so interested about what you just said, right, and the reason that fascinates me is because if you think about it, education is something that I believe really needs to be personalized, right? Everybody learns differently down to a genetic level. Like, we all have different ways that we like to learn. It could be on a high level. Some people like to learn more visually, some people like to learn more interactively. But even down to like, sorry, go ahead.
Multiple intelligences.
Yes, exactly. And it even gets down to like more nitty-gritty. And I feel like by using the power of, as you mentioned, neuroscience and AI, we can actually start to adapt learning more than ever before, and I feel like that's becoming more and more important. So thank you very much for sharing your insights on that. Now we do have lots of really interesting questions, so just before we get into those online questions, oh yes, go ahead, Dino.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask one question because this is really interesting, mentioning AR. I know that next generation holographs are coming. What if a teacher was a holograph? Imagine that for the future, right? And creating that interaction with the student. But I found out, and maybe this could be confirmed, I believe Minister Modi in India did his election rallies with virtual reality or holograms in the last election. Is that true?
Yes. And I think so. This is going to be the future of the entire world. AI would actually eat away many jobs that are existing. So I think technology right now, it has actually struck us at the right way where we can start adapting ourselves into the technology and get prepared for the future.
Wonderful. That is amazing to hear. And actually, thank you very much for that, Dino, because you have perfectly segued us into our very first question from the audience. And that question is from Akash Gupta. He says, can real lifelike experiences of any experiment or any concept be taught to students using VR or AR, so virtual reality or augmented reality? I'm going to keep this open. Anybody, what do you think?
To answer. I
yeah.
would like to answer.
Sure. Satwant, you can go ahead.
So this is already into practice. There are many institutions in India who have already started with augmented reality as well as a virtual learning. Recently, I was just checking out how photosynthesis occurs into the plants, how exactly calculus happens. On an honest note, calculus always went above my head. I never understood. But when I actually encountered the augmented reality video on how calculus is happening into the classes, or what is the slope of a line, and how photosynthesis is done, or how atoms are actually explode. So it is very much possible, and it is actually happening in right now in many schools in India. Although it is frugal, but yes, it is happening, and I'm sure, and I'm 100% sure, it gives much more impact to a child, because child actually experiences virtually what's happening in a 3D image. Whereas in a classroom, a teacher is actually just talking, or a teacher just might show a video of photosynthesis or any kind of an atomic structure or a chemical reaction happening. But this augmented reality and virtual learning has actually given a lot of impact, and it is happening actually into the classrooms.
Fascinating. That is amazing to hear. Now, I know Kathy, Dino, do you have anything to add?
I can see, for instance, actually near where you are, Tanmay, there's ICE VR, right? There's a perfect example of cybersecurity using augmented reality and some virtual reality so that they immerse you inside of the Israeli cybersecurity center, give you 90 minutes of fun training in an immersive environment on how to be safe and aware and understand cyber safety and the security. That's just one quick example.
Interesting, Kathy?
Yeah, there's a couple of examples. Certainly, similar to what Dino mentioned was, in Manitoba, and MITT is a participant in this, is that there is a cybersecurity challenge. So it's a challenge to all schools with teams, and they do things like there's a hack in say the prime minister's computer, and they get to figure out how to solve that, mitigate that risk. And there's other types of competitions like that, the cybersecurity challenge. And so those are really great ways to get kids engaged and interested. The other thing that I'm seeing, and this is more at the post-secondary industry level, which is, and it's more around physical safety, but where they're using AR and virtual reality to help teach safety training on job sites. So, if you need to learn how to run a forklift, you can do that virtually. They've been doing it in aviation and transportation for a few years now too. So I can see this becoming much more commonplace, not only in education, but also in industry. And one thing I'm curious about, and this is just a side comment, but in the technology side of things, you have to wear the big headset. And I think that if they can actually start to make that smaller and more like the size of your eye, like more like your eyeglasses, then I think that's where you're going to see the broader adoption of AR and VR across the world. So that's just my comment about what I think the future of AR and VR looks like from a physical.
I'd like to jump in, Kathy. I agree with you. I'd love to see like the old Google glasses kind of look that actually has all of that built in. And maybe someday they'll have it so that we can also have all the 5 senses. So if you're watching something like a flower, you could smell it, right?
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
That would...
Smellology.
Yeah.
That would definitely be really fun. In fact, I kind of feel like the way that Apple looks at AR is pretty exciting. In terms of the future isn't, at least the mainstream future for fields like education, in my opinion, is less VR, more AR, right? Because first of all, the form factor that you were mentioning, right? Our augmented reality is generally a lot more practical to use for situations like this than virtual reality. Now, there's some specific use cases for which VR excels, but in the majority of things, like for example, Satwant, what you were saying about calculus, imagine instead of being in like a virtual environment with all these different explanations and diagrams and like interactive experiments around you, imagine if you could place that onto a table and use your AR glasses to interact with it, right? But at the same time, you're still within the same environment. So it's more practical, it's easier to use, and at the same time you can manipulate the world around you instead of being in your own world, right? So I feel like that would be really interesting. Now next up, we have a really interesting question from Gokul Raj on Facebook. He says, there are actually 2 questions, and I want to start off with the first one. I feel like Satwant, you might want to start, but really anybody. What are the major initiatives taken to provide education to the unprivileged section in society?
Okay. So, as I have already mentioned that we have started, when I say we, it's like Government of India have already started developing certain apps which are parent friendly, and they have started uploading it on the Play Store, and they have been asking parents to download those apps from the Play Store. And there are many parent friendly activities in a very simple language, in the vernacular language, wherein the parents can actually browse through those and do those activities at home. Now, when I say those activities are mainly related to experiential learning, where it will be just not the textual content. It will be like the child has to perform certain experiments or do certain activities and then conclude on that. So, and I have witnessed that. I'm just not stating it. I have been a part of it, wherein right now we have developed lot many apps and lot many activities for the sections of the underprivileged society, especially the children, and they have been using that quite judiciously.
Interesting. All right, that's fascinating. And also, just to sort of add to that, we have another question from Akash Gupta again on YouTube, and he says, do you support efforts by the government to push low-cost solutions like a Raspberry Pi with a low-cost LCD screen and accessories? Full build can be less than $100 US.
I would like to jump in on that because
Definitely.
I love like Arduino and things like that. Yeah, those would be great ways of helping students understand STEM. And it's also a great way to create your own little computers. So for under $100 with an Arduino, you could set up, I don't want to talk techie, but 4K channels connected to your existing television. And you've got yourself an under $100 computer. You just have to buy the keyboard, which is included probably in that $100 with a little mouse. And away you go. You've got yourself a big computer screen and your Arduino.
Amazing. Yes, did you have to say something, Kathy?
Well, it's accessibility, right? So, and in fact, just an interesting note, the sales of Raspberry Pi went up exponentially when COVID hit. So, but again, I think it comes down to accessibility. So I think that we need to start looking at access, broadband access. If you're talking about underrepresented populations, I mean, certainly if you're in a city center, that's a different situation. But if you're in remote communities and you don't have access, you're essentially left behind. So I think until we start really looking at access as, if you believe that digital literacy should be the right of all Canadians to have access, then I think that's something that we need to be far more aggressive on. And I know the Manitoba government just recently announced that they were making a commitment to build out broadband access to all Manitobans, which I applaud. I do think that this has to be something that is embraced across the country. I think that is what is going to provide us with that continuity and consistency in education delivery for all our citizens.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that again, this is critical, right? If people don't have access to technology, then they simply cannot learn today. And we need to make it so that people have access to those resources, especially the internet, right? Because that's the one innovation that has enabled everybody to communicate with everybody else across the globe. So next up, we got a question from Timothy Duncan. He says, my wife is a teacher in Texas. They are totally virtual using Google Classrooms, and I've seen challenges since there was no practice prior. How much of this technology do you see actually being used in the long term? So, leaving this open-ended.
Well, technology is going to change over and over again. So, it kind of goes back to what we're using now could be different 6 months to 6 years, like definitely 6 years from now, but 6 to 12 months from now, everything could be quite different. But I think some of the basics will remain the same, some of the basic skills. So, I think it's just getting that mindset that you always have to continuously evolve and keep pace.
Mm-hmm. Satwant, you wanted to add something?
So I would like to just add, I would just like to give him an example of the phone. I think when the cell phones started coming into the market, we were very happy with the Nokia simple black and white phone, and suddenly and gradually it evolved actually with the colored phones, and then we came up with the smartphones, and then it is a touch-based phones and so on. I think the same thing would happen to technology as well. As of now, since before pandemic, we were just using technology integration into the classrooms. And that was the reason the teachers were not much prepared with the 100% online structures. Now, due to pandemic, I believe technology would evolve akin to the mobile phones. And maybe a few years down the line, we would find this platform, what we are talking was actually quite traditional or something related to the post era. It could be, as Dino suggested, that we could actually speak through holograms.
Yeah.
I'd like to add that too, Tanmay, if I could, is that I think one thing that's great about teachers and educators, and a lot of us folks too, but educators are always continuous learners, right? And they have to expand their skill set. They have to learn to respond to changing environments and new developments in order to get the teaching into the classroom to be relevant with what's happening in today's society. And what I'd like to say is that I believe technology, as it evolves, it actually, the user experience improves and the learning curve shortens. If you look at, and a good example, the telephone, when it first came out, it was Alexander Graham Bell screaming at a big little funnel that looked like a megaphone. And now, look at what we can do with our, cell phones. It's much easier, much more intuitive to use. And I think that'll happen with educational technologies or medical technologies. They'll become more user friendly, especially if we start to use artificial intelligence, AR, VR, all of the important things that we have with the Internet of Things.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And actually, this sort of ties back into the next question from Gokul Raj. And he says, what is the role of the field of education in creating awareness, and how can we use it as a key to fight a pandemic like COVID-19? If anyone would like to go ahead and answer. Go ahead.
I think it's right now, I think what's really interesting is I know that we're collecting data. Education is collecting data, and collecting that data is going to allow us to go back and reflect and see, how did things happen? What are happening to change things a week from now, 2 months from now, 4 months from now, and how did we react, or how are we preparing? So the important thing is using evidence-based information from collected data that we have, but also thinking about the future. Every crisis that's hit mankind has created a shift and an uptick into something new and better ways to do things and be prepared.
Interesting. Kathy, Satwant, would you like to add?
Well, I agree with Dino. I think what this is doing is it's creating an impetus for us to really look at how we used to do things and how and what the way forward is. And obviously, because we're collecting in real time massive amounts of data, we can make evidence-based decisions on what those next steps can look like. And you know what? We'll get it right and we'll get it wrong. And when we get it wrong, we're gonna fix it, right? Like we'll pivot again. And so I think that, really, like I think I said earlier, especially at the post-secondary level, there are some colleges and universities that have embraced online learning. We're very much early adopters, and there were some that were not. And so, that's where this whole shift in terms of delivery is going to make a big difference, both now and in the future, and how we evolve. And I think that from the K to 12, again, like Dino and Satwant said, was the notion that I think teachers in and of themselves are very creative and innovative people, and they do have that commitment to continuous learning. And so that will have a huge impact on our on students. And the idea that teachers can learn from their students and students can learn from their teachers. So there's that sort of reverse mentoring thing that can happen. And then I also think it's being more open-minded about how industry can actually contribute to help in terms of facilitating some of that learning, and also supporting that learning with real world examples. So we've seen firsthand in Manitoba how quickly experts in the industry are happy to get on and be guest lecturers in the classroom in a digital format. And that, I think, takes a lot of pressure off some teachers. They can learn from that, but it also is something that creates some variety and real world examples for students to be able to point to. So those are some of the things that I think are going to be more pervasive as we move forward and move past this pandemic.
Thanks for sharing. Satwant, would you like to add to that? We do have another question for you, though.
I would like to go to the another question. I think my thoughts have been already spelled out by Kathy and Dino.
Perfect. Makes total sense. We have a question from Ansh, and he says, how can technology in Indian villages flourish or keep up in a way to educate the underprivileged and to the girl child as well?
Okay. So I would just like to repeat the things what I've said before. If you talk about Indian villages, I believe internet is not an issue. Today, if you go to an Indian village, you would be seeing those people using WhatsApp and Facebook. So it means they have an internet access. Internet access is not an issue at all. The only problem is how exactly they need to use the technology enabled classrooms. So I would like to repeat again, we have developed apps here. I would recommend him to go to the Play Stores or just find it out from the many platforms that are present right now. There are many vernacular based apps wherein the people can actually download that, find out the activities, what are being mentioned, and they can actually access those study materials from those apps. Talking about girl child, I really don't know, because I think we have got into a lot of gender equality right now in India. And girls as well as boys have been equally exposed to this kind of a system. That's not an issue at all right now.
Amazing. That's great to hear. And now, of course, another question from Akash Gupta. He says, cheating is really easy in online assessments. How can someone prevent that?
That's what that was my major concern when my teacher started teaching online. That was a thing actually that triggered me to understand how neuroscience could actually help, how artificial intelligence could actually help in developing or building the assessments online. Right now, on a very honest note, we are still struggling on this part on how exactly to conduct the online assessments or the assessments where the cheating or copying could not happen. But I'm sure, as we have discussed before, the technology is going to evolve. We all are working on the system wherein we can find out some kind of a time frame based questions, or getting into some quiz or Kahoots, wherein we can actually curb the cheating or copying cases while doing an online assessments.
Nice to hear. So, Kathy, Dino, do you want to add to that?
I think, as you say, because everything's going to be in real time, and we'll be able to actually, if you want to record things and look at the anecdotal data, but also artifacts, you'll be able to do more assessments and more deeper assessments with the technology, and the student will be able to ask more questions and go back and relearn.
So I would just like to add one thing over here, Tanmay. What we have found out as of now when we were doing the online teaching, that assessments is just not the pen and paper tests. Assessments can also be conducting a debate session with the children, or maybe have some sort of a talk time with the child, or asking the children to do experiment and coming with the conclusion to just to understand what exactly the child has learned. So we are actually right now exploring on that kind of assessments wherein we could cater to the actual learning outcome rather than having a pen and paper test.
Interesting. Kathy, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is also going to be a way of looking at how learners demonstrate ability, knowledge, and skill in the areas that they're learning, as opposed to just doing a pen and pencil, multiple choice, that kind of thing. I think that there's going to be a lot more opportunities for them to actually show what they've learned. So if you think about learning in the simplest of ways, tell me, show me, let me try. All of those present opportunities to be able to assess whether or not a student has actually grasped a concept, learned a skill, etc.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing. Dino, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just and I was just saying what Kathy was saying there is that teachers need know how to do differentiated learning. So the nice thing is, as the technology improves, the more we can look at the different little social cues, little things that are happening in the online learning environment, or how the student is reporting back their homework, or how they're, how long it's taken them to do a math question. All those kind of things will be able to be looked at in the assessment piece. And again, it's all about making sure the technology is there that allows to go back and review artifacts, data, information, right?
Yeah, I think and just as a reminder to everybody, technology is a tool, right? So let's think about it in terms of a learning tool, and it's not the be all and end all. It's not the only way to learn. but it's a tool that we have at our disposal for learning.
I completely agree. Technology should be viewed as a tool. That's definitely a highlight of the session. Now we do have another question from Timothy Duncan. He says, "Has anyone on the panel seen the use of any special mobile apps or augmented reality glasses to aid students with disabilities?" Feel free to go ahead, Satwant, if you'd like to add.
It's a thought-provoking question, and I think this is related to inclusive education. On a very sadder note, I would say that as it is, our educators are struggling teaching the students with certain kind of disabilities into the classroom scenario. And when this distance has increased, it has raised more challenges. Because when a teacher has to teach a child with certain learning difficulties or learning challenges, there has to be a physical interaction. There has to be some kind of a face-to-face interaction. But I'm quite sorry to say that there have been a lot of initiatives taken, but that is not much taken into consideration, because more of the forefront is right now coping up with some kind of an online teaching with the normal classroom scenarios. But it's a definitely thought-provoking question where I think we all need to start pondering upon and working upon.
Interesting. Kathy, Dino, anything to add?
Well, I've seen I've seen some areas where augmented realities has helped students with, visual disabilities, and you've been able to use a device that helps them hear or give them senses better of where they are in location, proximity, and things like that. There's also one with hearing disabilities, and it's a young startup called Summit that we're working with, and they're helping to create environments with augmented reality so that students can learn that have a disability with either auditory or speech issues.
I think that the thing about adaptive technologies for people who have, visual impairments, hearing impairments, any kind of physical challenges, certainly I think that a lot of schools have had access to those, as have businesses. The challenge is now that people have moved into their home environments, how do you get those kinds of supports to families? And I think that there's a great disparity in that regard, and that's something that I think that we're going to have to be working on more vigilantly now that the whole paradigm is changed in terms of how we're delivering learning.
Interesting.
I would like to add to that is it's exactly what we've seen, at least in Ontario, that yes, we could do learning at home or remote learning, and but if you are a student with disability at home, it's really hard to do that, and we're losing that set of students. So I have a feeling when we talk about the new normalcy, maybe we'll see the spec ed areas get the students into the schools first. That might be one of the solutions so that they don't lose and fall behind.
I think this is also a place where some of the home devices, the IoT devices, can come into play. And this is where companies like Google and Microsoft may be able to exploit the potential of those devices to assist with learning in the home.
Interesting. Thank you very much for sharing. This is really insightful. And actually, just to add to that a little bit, there are actually some applications that I'm working on within this area of helping those with disabilities. In fact, I'm actually working on an application with my mentor Tim Duncan, who asked the question. And this application, it's called Project Cognitive, and the long-term goal is essentially to be able to use data points from us, from humans. Like, for example, like electroencephalogram, right? Your brainwaves, for lack of a better word, or as a good analogy, in order to do things like, for example, providing an artificial communication ability using the power of machine learning technology. We've reached a few milestones. So, for example, I've been able to use neural networks to analyze raw electroencephalogram and extract insight from it, in the sense that I can now understand mental states and things like this. But of course, we still need a lot of innovation on the technology front, right? We need a lot better hardware, and then the technology will follow. But right now, hardware is the number one issue, and so that's something that we are working on at the moment. So let's go ahead and see. Thank you very much, Tim, for that question. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Now, I do have actually another question for you, Dino, and that is that, I mean, a lot of the times I feel like there's a lot of innovation that happens at the cutting edge, and that it doesn't really get enough attention until it becomes mainstream. So have you seen anything happening at that cutting edge in the field of education, something innovative, something new that you think isn't getting enough attention yet, or something that you think will be getting attention in the future that we should know about?
Yeah, and that's one area that, as I mentioned, we've pivoted into community innovation. So we're starting to look at ways of how can we help manufacturing or agriculture or other areas. So an example of one that we're working on in the medical sector is being able to have augmented reality. And it was mentioned earlier before by Kathy and our team here, or virtual reality. So if you wanted to look at training, let's start with training of maybe a mechanical engineer or someone that's looking at a device or a manufacturing plant, and they could put on their Google Glass, or they could put on their AR, VR, and actually see that whole machine working, or that jet engine working, and then being able to take it apart by manipulating their fingers and in the air without even having to be next to the device, and then also being able to put it back together, and then look at diagnostics with it, and then look at the real device, and so putting applied learning with augmented reality is one example. Another one is we're working with a few high-level surgery companies that are using augmented reality to start teaching medical doctors how to go into a surgical situation, but do it with the augmented reality first and virtual reality.
Interesting to hear. As a matter of fact, what you just mentioned there towards the end around healthcare and virtual reality and augmented reality, next week we're going to have a special episode, which will be announced soon, with the world's most watched surgeon around a very similar topic. So do stay tuned on social media to hear more about that. And so now, before we end off today, there's one more thing I want to say. Of course, we've got a very diverse audience. We've got people joining from all sorts of backgrounds. And so I want to hear from all three of you sort of like a closing remark, a sort of closing message that you've got for the audience. We can start with Kathy. Would you like to share sort of like a closing thought for the audience?
Sure. I think the thing that we all take away from this is that we're not going to be going back to the way things were. And we have to invent a new normal. And that is going to have a huge impact on technology. I think that that's what the key message behind this talk is really about. That convergence between technology and education is only going to grow. And I really, truly believe that the collaboration aspect here is so important, that the way we're going to succeed is by having collaboration between industry, education, and government. Those are the three legs of the stool that have to come together. And I also see the role that parents are going to play in their child's education is really going to also remain and become even more dominant factor in how we go forward. So that's I'm actually really excited about what the future looks like for education, and especially too, as we noted, around cybersecurity and also being able to level the playing field for girls in some of these areas that have not traditionally been explored. And a lot of that doesn't mean about separating girls and boys. It's about creating more gender neutral language that makes the environments friendlier and more accessible for both genders.
I agree. Satwant, would you like to share your sort of closing
Yes.
remarks?
So this is my favorite quote. I used to say that quite long before, and now I think so it is coming up real. I always used to tell this to my teachers during the training parts, that our school we are actually the schools of past, having teachers from the yesterday, teaching students of today to prepare them for tomorrow. All these while my schools and my teachers never understood this, but now they have started understanding this, that right, those were the schools of were the past, with brick and mortar building, that's all. And we were from yesterday and who were starting to teach our students today to prepare them for tomorrow. I think pandemic has taught us the same thing, wherein technology has suddenly taken over a surge and made us understand that it is just not the face to face chalk and talk or a blackboard method of teaching and activity based teaching. Technology or the virtual reality or the virtual learning could be play a major role in teaching the children. Um, Actually, aligning this to the UNESCO's Sustainable Development Goal number 4, wherein we have to take care of our environment, we have almost started making our students sensitized to take care of the environment, to take care of the Mother Earth, to understand that the sustainability is a key factor right now. On the other hand, human species are such that who cannot be staying away for a long, like we are talking so much about social distancing or physical distancing. I really don't know for how long we are going to take this ahead, but I'm 100% sure maybe down the years, 2 years or 3 years down the line, we would get back to normal, and we would get back into the collaborative mode of teaching, wherein the students and the schools would be bustling with the cacophony of the students, and there would be a lot of learning happening into the classrooms.
Interesting. Thank you very much for sharing. And of course, last but not least, Dino, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. I think basically it was captured by both of my peers here. I think what's important right now to go away with is that we are lifetime learners. We are learning all the time. And as human beings, one of the best things that happens to us, it's like weightlifting. The more resistance, the more pressure you have on the muscle, the bigger the muscle gets. And that's what pandemic has caused for us, is the agility to move forward with new business processes, educational processes, building communities of practice with each other, collaborating, coming together all at once to either create a new solution, make sure that we stand, as humankind together for the future. So the important lesson is keep learning curve steep, because that's what helps us.
Thank you very much, Dino. That is amazing. So I mean, even just from these highlights, these sorts of closing remarks, you can tell that this was really an amazing discussion. And thank you very much, Kathy, Satwant, Dino. From these closing remarks, we know that we want to have more gender neutral language. We want to come back to this collaborative learning. We're lifetime learners, as you mentioned, Dino. We're going to continue to learn, and this was really exceptional. From my end, all I have to really say is that I've been homeschooled for the past couple of years, and not much has really changed except for the fact that it affords me more flexibility in the sense that I can learn organically. I can learn at my own pace, right? I can learn in the way that I personally find best. Of course, it was a difficult decision for parents to make. They were nervous at first, but eventually you sort of adapt to it, and if anything, it's been very helpful for me. And so thank you very much, everybody, for joining the live stream. Thank you very much, Kathy, Satwant, and Dino. I really appreciate it. Really great insights were shared on this panel. I really enjoyed it. I'm certain that the audience really enjoyed it as well. Of course, this will be available as a replay on YouTube Live. In case we weren't able to get to any of your questions, by the way, feel free to leave them as a comment on the YouTube Live. If it's in the live chat, we can't respond, but if it's as a comment, then we can respond, and we'll try to respond to as many as we can. So, as you know, technology and education are really being used in a way that is not separable at this point, right? Technology and education are being intertwined into a single field. Education depends on technology at this point. We're getting better at this every single day, right? We're still learning, we're still adapting, we're still inventing new techniques and new methods. Nowadays, there's no educator or no student that isn't technical, right? We all need to be technical at this point. And so I'm sure that as we go into the future, we're going to continue to adapt and only get better at it. So once again, thank you very much. It was an honor to have you three on the show, and thank you for joining, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It's a
Kathy.
pleasure.
Thank you very much,
It was
everybody.
great. It was a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Great meeting everybody.
Thank you.
It's
Same
great.
here.
Yeah.
Stay connected.
Yes.
We will.
Stay connected. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.